This happened to me 2 years ago. It was my first month on the job, and I work night security at this pretty interesting place. For the record, I still work there and have more strange stories possibly to tell in the future. I'm a 38-year-old male, and I've worked security jobs most of my life and the graveyard shift. I was an event security guard for various well-known concert venues for years, so I've seen my fair share of strange things and crazy people. In other words, I don't scare easily and hardly ever go into panic mode when a crisis comes up. The place I currently work is a resort-style apartment complex. To get the layout, there are 3 floors of apartments with 50 units on each floor. This place takes up one whole city block with a golf course in the back, indoor swimming pools, hot tubs, and a small movie theater. You name it, this place has it. Most of the residents are retired doctors, lawyers, or otherwise just rich. There are some younger people that live here as well, stockbrokers and real estate agents, and so on. Some just use the apartment in the summer and leave as soon as the snow falls. It is located in a well-known tourist town in the United States. The building itself has 12 exits on the first floor. The doors are locked by 11 p.m. and you can exit, but you can't get back in unless you go to the front of the building and ask to be buzzed in or pick up the call box phone next to whatever exit you're at. It will ring the company cell phone and I'll answer and come and let you in. In the middle of the building on the first floor are 2 big slider doors which I also lock. They lead to the private parking lot. The parking lot itself is gated and you need a code to get in. This was midsummer, and while it's never really hot here, tonight was an exception. It was still very warm after the sun had set. I came in 10 minutes early to start my 11 o'clock shift. We have a routine to hand the keys off, event log, and phone to the next person on duty. Despite its size, I'm the only security person here at night. My coworker, who was leaving, told me the side iron gate that leads to the parking lot are open on one side because they're stuck. This is nothing new, as they often do get jammed. She told me the repair people would be in tomorrow sometime to fix it, but to just do some extra patrol out here tonight. This place sits across the road from a public park, and while the area is pretty decent, the park tends to breed druggies and homeless people at night who sometimes like to try and wander onto the property or cause trouble. My night started out as uneventful. As a security guard in this place, we only have pepper spray and a large flashlight, keys, and a company cell phone to call 911 if need be. We are told not to confront anybody with bodily harm, nor can we detain anyone. We are simply eyes and ears to call the police if something comes up. Of course, you can defend yourself if you need to, but in all cases, if you're in danger, call the police is the company policy. Basically, I'm going to walk the grounds and floors for anyone suspicious, watch the cameras in the security office which is in the lobby, and otherwise try to stay alert. If a resident calls for a maintenance request, I would take the information down in the computer for the day shift, or if a resident called with a security issue, I would attend to it. It was a pretty easy enough job, I thought. I locked the doors to the parking lot and the lobby doors. I did a sweep of all the floors and then found myself back at the desk. It was really quiet, and it rolled around to 3 a.m. I had just sat down to eat my lunch when the company phone rang. The caller ID let me know it was from one of the outside call box phones. I picked it up and said, "Thanks for calling," and said the resort name. "This is Security Officer James. How can I help you?" All I heard was someone breathing heavy. I glanced at the cameras and could see a shadow of a figure standing just out of reach from the door and camera view. All I could see is the open call box and the metal cord from the phone. I again asked, "How can I help?" The man started to breathe heavier and laughed, and then silence. It was one of those laughs you hear in the movie when a lunatic is about to do something terrible. I got up from my chair and started to walk out of the office and to the door he was at, when the phone rang again. This time from call box number 2, which was further down. I quickly looked at the camera and saw this large figure in a hooded jacket. I knew this was strange, as it was very warm outside. He was holding back a bag in his hands, but had his back to the camera. "I'm coming for you, and you're gonna die," this voice said in a raspy, deep tone. He hung up before I had the chance to say anything, then the phone rang again. This time I picked up, and before he could speak, I let him know that the cops are on their way and to leave the property now as he's on camera. He tried the doors, but both were locked. This time, he was at yet another call box. The guy had been running at top speed to make the next and the next call box, as they are a good distance between the doors on the outside. "I can see you, and you're ready to die. The cops won't make it here in time," the guy said. I spoke loud and pretended like I was talking to another security officer, and asked him to send 3 other security guards to such and such location and that the police are dispatched. The guy slammed the phone down loud against the call box receiver, and I watched him on camera take off into the darkness to the park area. I figured it scared him off. I was going to call the police, but honestly the location of the place, it would have taken them at least 15 minutes to get here, and I figured this guy was just some tweaker from the park. I scanned the cameras and walked back to the lot just to be sure no one was there. I had my pepper spray in my hands just in case, but no one was out there. I returned to my desk and wrote down what had happened in the incident log. About an hour and a half passed, and I had just finished my lunch and was just about to do the rounds when the phone rang again. This time, it was from an unknown number. I thought it would be a resident calling for a repair issue or something. I picked it up, and I said my normal line. "Where are the cops?" "I don't see them, but I see you," the voice said. Fuck, it was that guy again. I scanned the cameras and didn't see anything. I went to the front door to look out, and there was nothing but darkness and a few front floodlights on. "I know you're alone, and you're gonna die soon," he said. I basically told him to get fucked and hung up. I called a non-emergency number to 911 and let them know what was going on. The dispatcher said they would send out a car to check the area and make contact with me. The next thing I hear is a loud thud against the glass windows to the day manager's office, which sits across the security room. Another 3 loud bangs. I run to the door and unlock it. I pull up the shades and shine my flashlight through the window into the darkness. I catch the face of this hooded man. He looked to be about 40, with long stringy hair poking down these wild eyes. He looked right at me and grinned before slamming his head into the window, trying to break it. I started yelling at him and told him the cops are coming and to get out of here. That's when he pulled out the biggest butcher knife I had seen in my life. This guy was crazy and probably on drugs. He continued slamming his body against the glass, trying to break it. He used his head to try to break the window, but managed to bust his head open. So the window now had blood all over it. I backed out of the office and locked the door to it. I then decided to wait for the cops, as this guy was out of control and my pepper spray wasn't going to stop him, and the last thing I wanted was to handle a bloody crazy person. He then ran to the nearest side door and took the call box phone off the hook. He then ran to each call box and removed all the phones, which caused my company cell phone to ring and jam up the line. This guy had to be on meth or something because he ran as fast as I could imagine. I watched the camera and noticed to my horror that the sliding glass door to the garage was open. Now it was common for the residents to go out to their cars and unlock the door themselves. It's just a sliding lock, like the kind in department stores, but this is the last thing I need with this nut job running around. I sprinted across the building and took a shortcut through a couple of banquet rooms to make it to the garage. As I was doing so, I saw that crazy guy running up to the garage pathway. I slid the door as fast as I could and locked it before we got to the entryway. He then slammed his body into the glass over and over, but the door did not move. I locked the second set of doors in case he got through the outside ones. He would at least be trapped or slow him down. I reached for my pepper spray, thinking maybe he would just leave, and yelled, "The cops are here." He started to laugh and howl, and then held that knife up again before running into the darkness of the parking garages. I called the cops on my personal cell phone to let them know that the man has a knife. The dispatcher told me that the cops would be there shortly, and I let her know what happened. I made my way to the front again and locked myself in the security office. At least this place had no windows, and I could watch on camera. I heard another loud thud and a bang and realized he was at the front lobby doors trying to get in. I was hoping the cops would roll up at any minute, but they didn't, and while it probably didn't take them long, it felt like forever at this point. The guy was standing at the lobby doors with his knife in hand. He faced the camera, and by this time his hood had fallen back. He was bald-headed with wild, long, stringy, crazy hair on the sides of his head. His eyes were huge, and I will never forget that grin on his face as he mouthed to the camera, "Die," while making a stabbing motion with the knife. Blood running across his face from slamming into the glass. About 5 minutes later, the cops showed up. They sent one officer. He asked me what the guy looked like, and I told him I have camera footage. He drove through the area first and shined a spotlight. The cop returned to tell me that he couldn't find anyone, and he had driven around the entire block and back area behind the golf course. I showed him the footage and printed out a picture from the camera. The cop said he didn't see any sign of the guy, and that he would patrol the area and to call back again if I need him. It was now nearly 5 a.m. when the cop left. I waited until 6 a.m. when it was daylight and people were starting to get out and about before I walked around and hung up all the phones from the call boxes. This guy literally took all 12 phones off the hook. When my manager came in during the morning shift at 8 a.m., I told her what had happened, and she said that they would have a meeting and to tell everyone to keep an eye out who worked here. They had an extra security guard on my shift for 2 weeks after, but the guy never returned. The cops never found the guy or who he was. I just hope to never meet the guy again. I work on a small dairy farm in the upper Midwest. It kinda has a weird layout, but I'll try my best to explain it. Right when you walk in, there's the milk house, and then you keep going and you're in the parlor. Once you get to the edge of the parlor, you can turn left into our calf barn, or right and make your way out to the big barn where the milking cows are. Also, I should mention that the calf barn is connected to an older barn that we keep pregnant cows in. The doors are never locked because we have people coming in at random times throughout the day. Plus, it's a barn, and there are doors literally everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Anyways, I'm a female who is fairly tiny, maybe 5'5", 120-ish pounds, and mind you, I'm still in high school. One night, I was working night shift, so anywhere between 8:30 p.m. and 2 a.m. Every shift, we work with one other person, and this night happened to be with another high schooler, about my age, but she's a little taller than me. But every shift, we milk the first pen, and then I'll go into the calf barn and turn the lights on to start the pasteurizer, so I can feed the calves. So I went and did that, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and I went back to help milk the second pen. After the second pen, I went to feed the calves. So here's the layout of the calf barn. There's an alley down it, with the weaned calves on the left, and hay and grain on the right for feeding. And then at the end of the barn is a big room. There's a row of 7 hutches right as soon as you walk in from the front left to right. And then, in the left corner, there is 6 pens, 3 on each side, with a little milk house in the middle for feeding purposes. The doors to the milk house are always closed to keep it warm in there. So I go in there and start my normal feeding routine, still not noticing anything strange. Then, I opened the door on the other side of the milk house to feed the far pens, and that's when I noticed the oldest, most weaned calves in the right pen were very skittish. I ignored it at first and went about with what I was doing, and then I saw him, a man, huddled in the back corner of the pen, just sitting there, and all black and bundled up because it was cold as hell out that night. But he sat there just looking at me, smiling. In between those far two pens is a double door that again isn't locked, making it easy for someone to get in. Anyways, I was holding a 5-gallon bucket filled with milk, and I dropped it, spilling it all over the ground, and I never booked it so fast out of there. I told my coworker what happened, and we hid out in the break room for a little bit with our barn dog. We eventually got the courage to go back and check it out, but the man was gone and the double doors were wide open. Thinking back, we should have called the cops on him for trespassing, but he never threatened us or the cows, and nothing went missing. I don't know if he was a homeless man looking for shelter in the cold or what, but my barn is a tad too far out of town for that. What scares me the most is that I walked in there more than once that day and I still didn't even notice him. So I have no idea how long he had been in there watching me. I've worked 2 night shifts since then, and I worked another one tonight. Since that experience, I've been sure to scan the barn and lock the doors when I'm feeding. So just a word of advice to everyone, not even just farmers, always be sure to lock your doors. Since I'm at home now because of my fibro disability, I've got a lot of time to read these chilling tales. It also gives me time to look back at my own past, remembering some of my own. I have several stories to tell and share. This is one of those memories that I remember, and I wanted to share it. Back in 2007, I started a tech job with an IP phone long-distance company. The company is no longer around, and honestly, I don't know how they stayed in business as long as they did. It was really a pyramid scam, but thankfully I was on the IT side of things, so I didn't have to sell anything. It was a small, typical tech support call center. The customers would call in, or Verizon or Quest, etc. would call and say that the DT1 lines were down or outages. I was the only female on my team, having to prove myself and show that I can do anything my male counterparts could. It didn't take long, and the customers respected me for being able to handle things. After making my mark, I decided to take the 10-hour night shifts. I work Wednesday through Saturday from 1 p.m. to 12 a.m. with an hour lunch, and after 6 p.m., I was completely alone in the whole building. Like I said, I was by myself for most of the night. I would have to keep an eye on emails and make sure I answered all the calls. It was a very slow shift. I would get a lot of video game, reading, schoolwork, and writing done during this time, but sometimes I would just wander in the building, walk around, just to get away from my desk for some time. I would have the phone system connected to my cell phone so no calls would be missed. This allowed me to get a soda, get food, and so on. One time, while I was up away from my desk, I was going down to the lunchroom to grab a soda. The vending machine was on the basement floor, by the way. The basement had a wall of windows and one set of security doors. Same for the main entrance, only there was one camera facing the door. Nothing else to really make you feel safe. I didn't like going to the basement much because the back of the building faced an acre of dark woods. There was a walking path to the woods, but for some reason they didn't install the lights for the walking path. Never really sure why that was, but it didn't help the creepy factor. Sometimes I would see animals run past, but other times I felt like someone was watching me. I always tried my best to make it fast when getting a soda or a snack, but sometimes it didn't feel fast enough. So, one night, I was making my way down to the basement of the building to get a soda. It was a slow, dragging night, and I needed a little caffeine for a pick-me-up. I counted my money as I walked to make sure I had enough to get in and out as quick as possible. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something dart from the glass door back into the darkness. I stopped, dead in my tracks, and tried to scan the forest, but like I said, it was just blackness. I felt a bit of unease, and everything told me to turn on my heels and go back to my desk. But it was 9 p.m., and I had a fair bit of time left on my shift before I could blow this pop stand. I tried shaking the feelings off and briskly walk over to the soda machine and made my selection. The soda dropped, and as I went to bend over to get it, I heard a loud ping noise. It was as if someone had hit the glass with something. I stood straight up and felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I slowly turned around and was scared to see someone out there, but as I made the full turn, I saw once again nothing but darkness. I thought this was a good time to book it back up to the main floor. I didn't bother with the elevator. I went to the stairs and ran up them. My heart was already racing from having to go down there in the first place. Then, the loud bang and running up 2 flights of stairs. Once I was back at my desk, I sunk down in my chair and tried to calm down. It was just one noise. I was in a building with locked doors and locked inner offices. I kept saying over and over again in my head it was nothing. I was relieved by that, but out of nowhere, I got that feeling of someone watching me again. I peeked up over my cubicle wall and looked around my office. Nothing seemed out of place until I turned to face the front of the building. Outside the first set of doors was a slender, tall, dirty male. He was cupping his hands around his eyes to try to see past the reflecting of the inside lights. I dropped back down in my cubicle before he caught sight of me. He didn't look like anyone I had ever seen at the office, and it was a little past 9 p.m. There is no good reason why he's checking out the office. As I sit in my chair, I hear the door shake. I slowly stood up and watched him pull the handles to the doors. They didn't budge to my relief. But as I watched him, he turned his face to me. His face looked bruised or dirty. I couldn't tell which. Once his eyes locked onto mine, he started to bang harder and smacking the glass. I was so scared. It was the middle of the night, and I was by myself and out in the middle of this office building complex. I grabbed my headset and dialed 911. While getting the operator on the line, the guy was walking back and forth from one side of the glass doors to the next. 911, what's your emergency? The lady's voice said. I told her my name and where I worked. I need someone to come out. There's a guy trying to break into my office building. While speaking with her, the guy disappeared from the view. I tried to look in all directions, but I didn't see him. I knew that he wouldn't just walk off, not with how hard he was banging. And then, out of nowhere, a good-sized rock came flying and smashed against the door. I screamed and went under my desk. The operator asked what just happened, and I explained that the rock smashed against the glass door. She asked me if the glass was broken enough to let him in. I didn't want to stand up and look, but she told me to look in order to know where he was now. I crawled out from under my desk and just peeked over my wall and saw a huge crack down the first part of the door. I sank back down and told her to please have the police hurry. She said that they were on their way. I have read many of these stories on this subreddit and people saying that the cops couldn't get there fast enough, and they aren't kidding. It feels like time is standing still and there's nothing you can do. I heard another smash against the door, but along with that glass breaking sound, sirens could be heard coming towards my building. It was music to my ears. I told the operator that the police had arrived and thanked her for all her support. I stood back up and looked over the cubicle wall, and the red and blue lights were flashing wildly. But the thing I didn't see was the man. The top part of the door was completely smashed, and the rock was laying on the inside of the entryway. One officer came to the front door, and the others were out scoping the area. I could see their flashlights moving all around the parking lot. The first officer came into the building, and he greeted me. He was a very kind man. He was patient with me and let me explain what I saw happen. Soon, my boss arrived, and he checked on me, then the damage. At some point, my husband was called, and I told him I would be escorted home by one of the officers. I took the next few days off and started to look for another job that wasn't by myself at nighttime. When I gave my statement, I explained to the officer that the person could be partnered with an ex-coworker who was fired a few weeks prior for stealing and just not showing up. He knew when people came and went. He knew where we kept the cell phones we were selling, from smartphones to Blackberries, when they were still worth buying, plus the call boxes and phone cards. I went on to leave this job a month later and started at a credit card machine company. It was an office full of people, still at a call center, but I felt safer, especially with the security and cameras all over the building. Like I said before, this company is no longer around. It was bought up by another company, and they basically liquidated all the funds that were worth something. But one thing's for sure, I'll never forget how terrified I was that night.